And we should be live. Everything's just popped up. Hey everyone, just give me one moment to double check that everything is good in the studio. And yes, we are live. Welcome everyone. Thank you all for being here. I see the chat is incredibly busy today. Welcome, Reason Dances, XYZ, Adam Leuchter, Thunderous. Oh, well, guys, we have Thunderous with us, our special guest. Welcome, Thunderous.
Hey guys, hope everybody's well and listening to the show, and hopefully we'll have some fun this evening.
Yeah, I think everyone enjoys having you on. I think everyone enjoys the things you discuss. So yeah, we're discussing Dhul Qarnayn, and apparently you're hoping to bring a fresh perspective to this particular topic. Yeah, so please, off you go.
Yeah, well, hi everyone. Dhul Qarnayn is obviously something that gets very little mentioned in Islamic sources or in Islamic discussion or in Islamic chat. So those times that we have discussed it in the past with other people doing presentations on it, we tend to be looking at Alexander the Great, and I think that those topics and discussions have been very good, but it would be silly to repeat it. So we're looking at things in a different perspective now. And for those who follow the Bible, they'll be familiar with the phrase of let scripture interpret scripture. So sometimes if you want to understand something in the Bible, you would look at other verses or books in the Bible to get a better understanding of that particular subject or theme. And that's exactly, hopefully, what we're going to be doing tonight with Dhul Qarnayn, or the account in chapter 18 of the Quran. But before I start, I think it's only fair that we look at some Quranic scriptures first. One that's very popular with a lot of people would be chapter 2, verse 2, and it reads here from the Sahih International: "This is a book which there is no doubt. Picthel, no doubt. Yusuf Ali, guidance sure without doubt. Shakir, as a guide with which there is no doubt," so on and so forth. So we're getting the idea, and there is obviously chapter 11, verse 1, there's chapter 12, verse 1, there's chapter 15, verse 1. The idea is the Quran itself explains this is a book with no doubt. Another point that we want to have a look at is number 2, which is where the Quran itself says this is a book with which there is no discrepancy. So, for instance, you might look at chapter 27, verse 1, where it says here, these are verses of the Quran made clear. Okay, that's in the Sahih International. Picthol says a scripture that maketh plain. Yusuf Ali, clear again. Shakir, clear again. So we get the idea now. Allah
Right.
is saying in his book, this is a book made clear. This is a book that's easy to understand, a book that there is no doubt. So scripture is now going to interpret scripture, and it is Allah that set the precedence for this in his own book. This is not you and I or non-Muslims trying to analyze the Quran with say biblical or say atheistic lens. We're putting Muslim glasses on now, and we're going to look at things the Muslim way. Okay, so now we've settled that. I want to bring people's attention to something that I put on my YouTube channel the other day, which is Yasser Qadhi. Yasser Qadhi, in a short little clip I put on my channel, admits that up until the days of Muhammad, the Arabic language was progressing until it reached its pinnacle with Muhammad. Let me repeat that, because that's what Yasser Qadhi said. Islamic Arabic language reached its pinnacle with Muhammad. Now, does that not show there's a problem there for you, Lloyd? What problem do you think is there when Yasser Qadhi says the Arabic language reached its pinnacle with Muhammad?
Um, well, I mean, we didn't plan this together, so I'm just kind of learning this as you're going. But
Okay,
Arabic
well,
wasn't a fully developed language at that
no,
point in history. The Arabic language was only completed with the diacritical marks and such like a couple of centuries later. So there would have been very much confusion about the language. The dialects hadn't been fully resolved yet, so it wasn't properly written down. So I think that's probably just the start. Or have I missed anything?
well, the interesting thing is, and this is what other people miss. What the missing component is, when Allah was in heaven, he spoke to the pen to write the Quran. So what language would Allah have used?
Arabic, of course.
And what language did the pen write the Quran in?
Well, here's the thing: the Quran would have been written in an unfinished version of the Arabic. So why didn't Allah have fully completed, fully modernized Arabic?
You're being too intelligent and asking logical questions there, Lloyd. We want to look at this with Muslim glasses on, not intelligent atheist or intelligent Christian or Jew glasses. So if Allah is in heaven, he's asked the pen to write a book. That will all be done in Arabic. When Allah is speaking to the angels, what language is he using?
Apparently Arabic.
When Allah creates Adam and he asks Satan to bow down to him, what language is he using?
You know, that's a very fair question.
All right. Okay. Then when Muhammad says hello to the angels, what was the response the angels gave Adam?
Well, don't forget though that each of these prophets received revelation in their language,
Wait
right?
there.
Yep.
Wait there.
Okay.
Adam spoke to the angels in Arabic. They responded in Arabic when they said, he said Assalamu alaikum, they said Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah. So they added a component in Arabic to him. Adam is then evicted from heaven onto earth. So what language would Adam have spoken to Eve?
Arabic?
And it would have been the purest form because it's the form that was in heaven. So what should be the oldest language on earth?
Arabic.
So
Okay.
why is Yasser Qadi saying that the Arabic reached its pinnacle with Muhammad?
Maybe because Muhammad had perfect speech, but that is true. That is interesting. And Arabic, we know, did not exist before what, second, third century, because it was an amalgamation of a number of other Semitic languages, especially the Yemeni and the Ethiopian. So you had the
But
Ge'ez and it's a mixture of a number of languages and then borrowed words from dozens of other languages.
absolutely. But the thing is, you see, if you look at Islam from its beginnings, from its inception, using only Islam, it doesn't make sense as far as language is concerned. So already there's a discrepancy in language. Arabic should be the first language. It's the language spoken in heaven. So when Yasser Qadi says it reached its pinnacle in the, say, the 6th century, that's not true. He's contradicting his own narrative with that. So that's another hole that he's created. So then also when you think about it,
That's true, but if
Muhammad,
the actually reasoned answers just reasonable answers apologetics, because he has reasonable answers. Just kidding, right? He says if the Quran isn't the Quran the pinnacle of Arabic, so did Muhammad write it now according to Qadi? So yeah, if you mean so Muhammad wrote even greater Arabic than Allah himself?
the questions just keep asking, don't they?
You're right. Actually, I'm just bringing up something in the this is from the book Foreign Words in the Quran by Arthur Jeffrey, and this is a listing of the foreign words. You can see here we have Syriac, Aramaic, Hebrew, Greek, Ethiopic, and a whole bunch of languages. And you can see there's a number of words. So there's like something like 14,500 original words in the Quran, and a number of those come from these other languages. And that book lists, I think, 51 languages. Here we 55 related languages. Yeah, sorry, go on. Yeah.
Yeah. So Muhammad himself said, and I forget where this hadith is. It says that the first 3 generations of Islam from Muhammad's day were the purest. So that would be the Sahaba, the Tabayun, and the Tabayin. So the first 3 generations of Islam would be the best of generations of as far as Islam is concerned. Now, one has to bear in mind, they would have had the purest form of Islam that there was, because they got it basically straight, first hand or second hand, from Muhammad's mouth. Hence why he's probably saying these will be the greatest Muslims from my ummah, the first, second, and third generation. The point that I'm trying to get at here is, even if you give each generation a lifespan of 100 years, that will still be 300 years from the Hijrah. All right. When you look at the Islamic sources, as far as the narrative is concerned, what you find is that the exegetes, the tafsirs of Islam, all of them have a consistent pattern with the way that they understand words in Islam. So we're talking about a pure language that came from heaven, that was given to Adam. Adam brings it to earth. Somehow, mysteriously, the language gets lost. It then reaches its pinnacle with Muhammad, according to Yassakadi. The first three generations of the Arabic language are going to be the purest form. The exegetes are not arguing about what words mean, but we find that the arguments come after the more that the more understanding we have of what, well, not just what the Quran says, because the Muslims already know that, but what the non-Muslims say, but also what they find as far as geography and history is concerned. And we're going to look at that now. So if we go to the Quran, and we're going to start with let's see, where's this? Is it verse 1883? So I'm going to use the Yusuf Ali translation of the Quran this evening, and it reads here, 1883, they ask thee concerning Dhul Qarnayn, say, I will rehearse to you something of his story. So what's the situation here? Allah is telling Muhammad, those pesky Jews and those pesky Christians, you know, it's a bit like the security guard.
If I can just fill in briefly for the audience. So Muhammad needs to prove that he's a prophet, and these Jews want evidence. So they say, to tell us stories of the past that you should know. And they ask him to talk about Dhul Qarnayn. And Muhammad says, okay, give me 24 hours and I will answer. And then, of course, he asks Allah, but he doesn't say, Insha'Allah. So Allah gets upset with him. So for 2 weeks, Allah gets grumpy and doesn't talk to Muhammad. And then only 2 weeks later, does Allah then come back to him. So obviously Muhammad needed a couple of weeks to go and do some research.
Absolutely. And you just think that this is not the first time that the Jews ask him a question of where he's to provide an answer, but we might look at that in a moment. So just going on with the Yusuf Ali translation, right? So it says here, the point is, so they've asked him a question, okay, tell us about Dhul Qarnayn. So those pesky Jews and Christians are going to ask him some tricky questions. The Dhul Qarnayn narrative, account, story, myth must have already been known prior to the Quranic revelation for those pesky Jews and Christians to ask Muhammad or to test him. So the story must already be there. Yep. You'll notice it's the Jews and the Christians. Now, the Jews have the Talmud, so they have the Talmud, but they also have, say, the Genesis to Malachi scriptures. We do not find this narrative in those scriptures. We find Gog and Magog, which was written by Ezekiel 1,000 years earlier, and at the end of the first century we have John in the book of Revelation in chapter 20, I think it's verse 2, where it talks about the end of the 1,000-year reign, Gog and Magog will be let loose and they'll go to the four corners. But that's an irrelevance. We just know that that's where the words Gog and Magog come from, but we don't need to be concerned with that at the moment. Where I'm going to with this is that the response then would have to meet the listener's expectations for Muhammad to be accepted, as the account is not in Hebrew or Greek scriptures. It would have to have been known via other sources.
Right.
Did you get the point?
I'm going to bring this up. This was the document you sent me, Gog and Magog in early Eastern Christian and Islamic sources. So the stories of Alexander the Great and Dhul Qarnayn go back well before the 2nd century, but we can find sources, Christian sources, from like the 4th and 5th centuries. This is prior to the birth of Muhammad.
Yeah. So the story is around in various forms. The Yemenis have their own version. The Persians have their own version. The Christians have their own version.
Ethiopians have their own version as well.
Yeah, so it's very much, I mean, just before we came online, I was just saying to you, wasn't I, that it's very much like the flood narrative. We have the actual account of the flood, Noah's flood, in the Bible, but wherever else you go in the world, you get some kind of variation of it. You get the same sort of theme. The world was not a nice place. God destroyed it with water, and a family of people survived on a boat. You don't get a greater detail than that, but it's pretty much the same sort of thing wherever you go in the world. It's only the Bible that has the greater original detail.
Right.
So verse 1884 reads, verily we established his power on earth and gave him the ways and the means to all ends. So what do we derive from this? He was a Muslim as he was blessed by Allah. Who taught him the ways of being a Muslim? He was a world power as established by Allah, but who was he? Where on earth does he originate?
Well, the
When?
Muslims, he's not named. Because Dhul Qarnayn is a title. It is not a name. So very conveniently, they don't know who he is. But he was supposed to be one of the four greatest emperors with one of the four largest empires ever at that time in history. So we know so they identify, I believe, Dhul Qarnayn, Nimrod, Nebuchadnezzar, and there was a fourth one. I can't. I'll know. I'll get the fourth one later.
Solomon.
So who was he? Solomon. Solomon. You're right. Solomon. Correct. Solomon, yeah, Salman ibn Dawood, they call him, yeah. So, who was Dhul Qarnayn? Which of these, you know, it? I mean, who? If he was a genuine historical figure, then who was he? If he had one of the four biggest empires of that period of history.
And it's the interesting thing is when we look at world powers historically, particularly when we're looking through the lens of the Bible, we find that there were seven.
Pause a
Six.
second. So, Jib, Cyrus, there are too few parallels with Cyrus the Great. The whole concept that Dhul Qarnayn may have been Cyrus is based on a single rock inscription with Cyrus, who has horns at the time, but also
Yeah.
has wings, right? But don't forget that Alexander the Great also revered Cyrus the Great, right? He revered Cyrus the Great. So yeah, but there are too few. There's only one parallel with Cyrus the Great and a whole lot of disconfirming evidence. Go on, please, Thunderous.
Yes, so just on that verse as well again, so we have to ask questions like what language did he speak? So that there are questions that we need to ask in order to understand who he is. That the Quran. Now, if this is coming from Allah, these are the answers from Allah. Then why is it the Quran, which is in heaven? So Allah would have known what questions that these Jews are going to ask, because Allah knows all things. Yet the details Allah is giving to Muhammad to give to the Jews and the Christians lack even less than what the mythical stories are that already exist in the time of Muhammad or existed before Muhammad. So the stories that existed about Dhul Qarnayn before Muhammad have more information in them than what the Quran is giving, yet the Quran was in heaven before anybody was ever created on earth. That doesn't seem to make sense. So then,
Sorry, I was typing, but I missed that. Just repeat that for me again, please.
the Quran has less information. So the Quran was in
Hmm.
heaven. So the
Oh,
pen
you're right.
asks Allah, "What do you want me to write?" The pen writes the Quran in heaven in Arabic. Allah knows all things. So as the pen's writing the Quran, Allah will have known in the future that those pesky Jews and those pesky Christians, like the children in the Scooby-Doo cartoon, are going to question Muhammad, those darn kids.
Right.
They're
So
going to
why didn't
question
he
Muhammad.
provide that information?
But the information that already existed pre-Muhammad was greater than the information provided in the Quran by Allah. That doesn't make sense. Why is it Allah's giving less information than what pre-existing stories already exist at the time?
Allah knows best.
Well, does he?
Allah knows best.
So just going on from verse 85 now, it says there, one such way he followed. Well, how old was he when he set off on this journey? The reason why I ask this question is when you look at the Bible and you find certain people are doing certain things, let's say a certain king, whether it's in the Judaic line or whether it's in, say, secular history, or if a person's doing a certain thing, there's two dates you normally get: the date of the reign that he did it, or his age when he did it, or his age when it
Mm-hmm.
happened. We don't find this information, yet it's supposed to be the same God that revealed the previous scripture. So a narrative, a historical narrative is being given here. We do not get the date of his reign when he did it, and we do not get his age when he did it.
Yeah, we
That's
know
not
he was born in what, 356. He would have died in 324 at the age of 32. And I just had up on the screen, I had the size of his empire, which was enormous for the day. He was born in Macedonia, just a year
Yep.
above Greece, right? This is Troy here, and he went all across Asia Minor, into Egypt, into Mesopotamia. Now, here's the thing. If Dhul Qarnayn had the largest empire and had the whole world under his power, how come we don't know who this historical figure is? I mean, yeah, this lack of evidence, the vagueness is high. It's mythical. It's just myth
But
making.
when you look at Alexander the Great there, what direction was he going in from Macedonia, east or west?
East,
But which direction is Dhul Qarnayn going in?
the setting sun, west.
There's another question that needs to be answered.
Fair enough, yeah, because according to, yeah, he goes, if you go to 86, he reaches the
So
setting place of the sun.
But just before we go to
Yeah.
86, 85, it says there, right? So I'm asking the question, well, who was with him? When a king sets off on a journey, is he going with his friends? Is he going with his family? Or is he going with a battalion of people?
He takes an
I
army.
mean, he would go with his army. Whenever a king goes somewhere, back in those days, they would take their army with him. Yet there is no mention. It's kind of alluded that this guy is walking on his own to some kind of direction of nondescript. We don't get any information as to where he's going or why he's going there. What's his motive? Then we get to 86. Okay, it says here in the Yusuf Ali again, until when he reached the setting place of the sun and he found it set in a spring, murky water. The Sahih International reads it, he found it as if, in brackets, as if, that's in parentheses, because it's not in the Arabic, setting in a spring of dark mud. Pikthal, he found it setting in a muddy spring. Shakir, he found it going down into a black sea. Muhammad Sawa found it setting in a warm source. Mohsin Khan, he found it setting in a black spring of muddy water. Arbery, he reached a place for the setting where he found it setting in a muddy spring. Can anyone see a pattern emerging yet? You'll notice that all these translations are probably done well before the arguments started coming from the Muslim apologists. So they've already set the language as literal, not figurative. And we're going to be
Yes,
looking
and
at
then
that.
afterwards they had to alter it to be allegorical or yeah.
No, that's only the polemics. The language doesn't, because if you go to the Quran.com, it gives you there's lots of good tools on the Quran.com, which is something I'm going to go into in a moment. So the questions that we have to ask here is, there is no angelic intermediary. Okay, Allah speaks direct to Muhammad. Okay, he reaches the place where the sun sets in the muddy spring of water. This is literal and not figurative, as all translations render it as literal. We don't need to go into how big was it, or was it a spring, was it a sea, was it a loch, or was it a lake. But the interesting thing is, Allah always says one thing when he means something completely different. Yet he's supposed to be the greatest communicator that exists. So why was Dhul Qarnayn given the option to treat with? I've just jumped ahead there. Sorry.
Hmm.
The rest of the verse reads, we say to Dhul Qarnayn, either thou shalt chastise them or shalt treat them with kindness. So he comes across a muddy water, meets some people, and Allah is basically saying, well, punish them or treat them with kindness. But yet we get no understanding as to what the situation is, as to why Allah is giving Dhul Qarnayn the command, whether to punish them, whether to treat them with kindness. First of all, if you're going to punish them or treat them with kindness, it would have to be based on some kind of law. So were these people aware of who Allah was? And what law were they breaking? And why is Allah going to punish them if they did not know the law of Allah?
That is true, but also another issue is that early on it seems that the Muslims believed that Dhul Qarnayn was Alexander the Great, and then of course in time enough information was known about numerous different cultures tried to they okay, I know among the Egyptians Alexander the Great was elevated to the status of a deity. He was worshipped, his father was a god, and he was given the ram's horns because his father, the god, had ram's horns, right? So he inherited the symbol as a symbol of his deity, of his godhood. However, different cultures tried to adopt Dhul Qarnayn or Alexander the Great as a great symbol as part of their religion to get
Yeah.
that prestige. When the Muslims eventually, when history caught up with them, they realized he was an outright pagan, and therefore they then had to suddenly distance themselves from him. And therefore Dhul Qarnayn suddenly stopped being Alexander the Great and became this mystery figure that no one knows who, this incredible kingdom, this incredible empire, this great leader that no one knows who.
And you can see in the Islamic polemics why they've had to move away from Alexander the Great, though for the first, say, 1,000 years, that's exactly who they thought it was. It's only because in the light of history that we now understand who Alexander the Great is. He was anything but a Muslim, that now they've had to find somebody else that, even from the weakest point of view, that they can align themselves, because this guy was a Muslim. So they've got to find some kind of nature or character about this guy, this world leader, that fits some kind of description as to describe as a Muslim.
He was a
Now,
great, the great, who, just pause 1 second, Glory Hallelujah. Thank you very much. I'm very grateful. Thank you for the donation. Oh my gosh, Adam Seeker just said now they found out that Alexander the Great was gay. So now he's not a
Yeah.
Muslim. That's oh my, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he it doesn't it wasn't one of it Alexander so Adam Seeker might be able to confirm this. It was one of his generals he had a relationship with. I stand to be corrected, but I'm
Good
sure
grief.
Adam would probably confirm that.
Yeah, so who was this great Muslim ruler? Where was his holy book? Where was his version of the Quran? Where was his version of Islam? Right? And who was this great Muslim ruler? One of the four greatest rulers in history.
And the thing is, he's going to a location where they're breaking laws. There's no description as to what laws they're broken, but Allah's already telling them to show mercy or to be wicked or to judge them. And we know when Allah says to judge, it's going to be an adverse judgment. It's going to be a painful punishment for them. But we're not given any description as to what's taking place for that to take place. And we don't find that consistent with any previous scripture when we're
Yeah.
looking at Greek and Hebrew scriptures as far as Judaism and Christianity is concerned. We
And what
don't
is
find.
interesting is this is the route that he took, and this is the area that he conquered more or less. Wouldn't there be some kind of evidence of the religion he left behind? Wouldn't he be pushing his own religious ideas? Wouldn't there be something like Islam here prior that we can historically verify?
But the thing is, though, Lloyd, that would be the same for Cyrus and Darius as well, because they're the only two options left for Muslims to use, Darius or Cyrus. But we don't find them doing the same thing either.
Right.
The interesting thing is that when you use the Quran.com, you can see what words are being used in various verses and how they've been translated. In when you look up the verse in the Quran of 1886, the word being used is wajada, and you can actually use that source to find how many other times the word wajada is being used in the Quran. So every time you go to those verses, let's say 337 or 5104 or 728, 744, 7102, 95, 1078, so on and so forth, it's always with looked, or they go to a certain location where they've seen it and they've met it. It's not figurative. If you want figurative, it's shubiha, and you find that as you find that in say 225, 270,
Mm-hmm.
280, 37. So if it's figurative, then why was the word shubiha not being used instead of wajada, which is literal, whereas shubiha is figurative? So if they went to the location, if Dhul Qarnayn went to the location and it was a figurative setting in the muddy pool, then the word shubiha should have been used there, not the word wajada.
Right. Yeah.
And yeah,
Okay.
every time if anybody wants to go onto the Arabic that the Quran.com, that's a great source to finding out what words were being used and how the
Oh,
first 3 centuries and the first 400 years of tafsirs and exegetes took it as literally setting in a muddy pool and not figurative.
and also he's called. I mean, he is called the two-horned one. In Islam, he is literally called the two-horned one, and we know that Alexander was known as the two-horned one, right? This is something that is familiar to him. Actually, can I bring up something here? So, for
Sure.
instance, this image you see here is apparently a facial reconstruction through AI and using various artworks to reconstruct how Alexander the Great looked. Okay, so this is apparently, I mean, in the speculation, using this AI software to determine how he looked. And you'll notice this in the bottom right corner. This is a little cell phone picture of myself that I took 30 minutes ago. So it's just incredible the resemblance between my face here in this bottom right corner and this picture of Alexander the Great. What do you think of that, Thunderous?
I'm alarmed.
I just think it's incredible. I mean, it's incredible. So yeah, that aside, briefly, I want to play something by Yasser Qadi in a moment. But notice they've also had to change him from prophet to king because it's not a name; it is a title. No one knows who he is. He's not a prophet. He was given power, not knowledge from Allah. He was supposed to be a righteous king. Ibn Abbas called him a righteous man. Qarn, Dhul Qarnayn, means horn. Some of the theories was he controlled Persia and Rome. Each was considered a horn, right? he had two ponytails. Each of his ponytails was a horn. So maybe he had like Pippi Longstocking ponytails that curved upwards. Who knows? He controlled east and west. Each was a horn. There's just all these weird theories. And of course, the story in chapter 18 of the Quran, Surat Al-Kahf, the cave, it was revealed in response to the efforts by the Jews of Mecca to discredit Muhammad, right? And can I just play for like a minute and a half this story by Yasser Qadi? Because this might be enlightening for everyone, just so that they can hear what Yasser Qadi has to say. Would that be all right?
Mm-hmm.
And in reality, we do not know. Also, there is this Islamic legend that is very popular that Dhul Qarnayn is somehow Alexander the Great.
No sound?
And the fact of the matter is that...
No, sorry, it's me. Sorry, it's me. Apologies.
There is not a shred. One of the two horns, the one of the two horns. Why is he called Dhul Qarnayn? Many are the stories given. Some have said he was the only person to rule over both Persia and Rome. So each of them is a qarn, so they're Dhul Qarnayn. Right, this is one opinion. So he's a mighty king that maybe sometime he controlled both of these lands. Another have said that Dhul Qarnayn is called Dhul Qarnayn because he would have his hair tied up in two, if you like, ponytails, if you like. And each one in the Arabs, they call a tail of the hair, they call it a qarn. So Dhul Qarnayn, he has these two ponytails. Maybe in some cultures, they had the men have this, so he's called Dhul Qarnayn. And others have given other stories as well that he controls the east and the west. And in reality, we do not know. Also, there is this Islamic legend that is very popular that Dhul Qarnayn is somehow Alexander the Great. And the fact of the matter is that there is not a shred of Islamic or historical evidence that links Alexander the Great with Dhul Qarnayn. In fact, quite the contrary, there's a number of things that do not fit at all with Alexander the Great and Dhul Qarnayn. The most important of them, Allah describes Dhul Qarnayn as being a pious Muslim, a good man, as a rajul salih, as Ibn Abbas said. And we know historically beyond a shadow of a doubt that Alexander the Great was a pagan idolater. He was an idol worshipper. His teacher was none other than Aristotle. Aristotle was the tutor of Alexander the Great. This is literally historically. Alexander the Great was tutored by Aristotle. And these people were not believers in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They believed in a pagan religion. So Alexander the Great has nothing to do with the story of Dhul Qarnayn. Who was he then? Allahu A'lam. People, if you look at the books of tafsir, they give all of these stories, and really in the end of the day, these are simply Islamic legends. There's no shred of evidence in the Quran and Sunnah, and the more details we go into that are unnecessary, the more trouble we put ourselves into. Let's stick with the Quranic story and don't go too much into the details that Allah did not care to tell us about because they're not relevant. So
back to you, Thunder. It's not relevant. Don't investigate. You know, Allah didn't deem fit to tell us.
That's the problem, though, isn't it? Because for the first few centuries, recent advances brought out that all of them. Now, the exegetes took the sun setting in the muddy pool as literal. They took Dhul Qarnayn as Alexander the Great. It's only in the light of science and in the light of history that we're finding out that what the first... Now, remember, Muhammad himself said that the first three generations are the purest. They would have understood exactly what Muslims for the centuries after that understood, that Dhul Qarnayn was Alexander the Great and the sun sets in the muddy pool. And we're not seeing a pattern here, but this is the criticism that needs to be labeled. They could not have been the purest. Either Muslims are wrong today or Muslims were wrong then. But either way, Muslims are wrong. And when Yasser Qadi says, don't ask questions, okay, we're going to be, well, I've only just started, I haven't got to the meaty part yet, or where the real questions actually are. This is just, you know, looking at it using the Arabic language and how they twist things. And the thing is, you see, with Islamic polemics, and I've seen some of the arguments where they've tried to retrospectively say, well, it was a story written before the Quran, sorry, not written after the Quran, but it's being applied retrospectively to before the Quran. And you know that when you've got, say, a Didat or a Naik that makes comments like that, the audience, they'll just go along with that historical narrative that they've got from their Muslim scholar. For instance, Yusuf Estes, when he turned around and says the Catholic Church was set up 300 years before Jesus was on earth.
Right.
Now, you can't convince a Muslim that nods his head to that with any evidence that what he's just been told is false. So the only way you can really try and undermine their faith with reality is by asking logical questions based on what their texts teach, or what their text says, or what their God says. So
Right.
I'm just going to jump a little bit now. So 1887, he said, sorry, go on. Was you going to say something there, Lloyd?
Just that Adam Seeker mentioned something that he's known as Iskandar, the two-horned, and
Yes.
in Islam he was known as Iskandar so this was his original name. So he is called that. He is known within that tradition. And then they also try and say that these traditions are late and come after Islam and so on. So, yeah, go on. Thanks. Oh.
Yeah, so I was just going to say then, so 1887 says, whoever doth wrong, him shall we punish, then shall we send him back to his Lord, and he will punish him with a punishment unheard of before. So yet again, we don't get any understanding as to what is being done here, and even why they're going to be punished, and why the threat has to be so severe. So moving on to verse 1888, it says that, but whoever believes and works righteousness, he shall have a goodly reward. In these he will be his task, as we order it by our command. So yet again, it's just gibberish. There's nothing really being said here. It's almost like Muhammad is standing there filling holes or padding out a narrative or a story just for the sake of making it sound, I could say, authentic. But there's nothing really here apart from gibberish. Then on verse 89, then he followed another way. Yeah, again, where's he going? Why is he going there? Who's he going with? More gibberish. Then 1890, until he came to the rising of the sun, he found it rising on a people for whom we have provided no covering of protection against the sun. So he came to the rising, clearly indicates location and not at the rising of the sun. So going back to the setting of the sun and the rising of the sun, these are literal. He rose to the location. It's not to be inferred that it was at a certain time of day. Thus, in context with the narrative, as no time of day is ever mentioned, this guy is at the location of the rising of the sun. The people he meets are clearly mentally deficient, as they cannot protect themselves from the sun's scorching heat. I don't understand that. We had provided no covering or protection against them. So why are the people standing in the shade then, if they've got no protection from the sun? Does that make sense to you, that they're intelligent human beings and they don't have any protection from the sun? So there's no shade. They can't build something to protect themselves from the sun's heat. It's just meaningless. It has no. I don't understand. If this book is supposed to be for mankind, so we can learn something from it, what are we learning from this?
Look, the Quran. We know the New Testament and Old Testament are utilized by archaeologists to either locate things that they're trying to find, or to identify things they have found. We know that the Gnostic Gospels and the Quran have literally zero archaeological value.
Right, then verse 92, then he followed another way. Where's he going now? It's like, this dude needs an update on his TomTom, because Allah's GPS keeps sending him in circles. Then 1193, until we reached a tract between two mountains, and he found beneath it a people who scarcely understood a word. So here, you see, Dhul Qarnayn now comes across a community of people. They scarcely understand a word. So how is he able to communicate with them? How did he communicate with them if they scarcely understand a word? How did they communicate with each other if they scarcely understand a word? Verse 1894, they said, "Oh, Dhul Qarnayn." Well, hang on a minute. They barely understand the word, but they now know who he is. "Oh, Dhul Qarnayn, the Gog and Magog people do great mischief." There's that ambiguous word that Islam loves to use, mischief. Shall we then render thee tribute in order that thou erect a mighty barrier between us and them? A tribute is a payment of sorts. So they were industrious, yet they scarcely understood a word. So they must have had some kind of reward for him, a payment. So they scarcely understand a word, but they understand currency and gifts and tributes. Does that make sense to you?
None of it makes sense. I mean, it's myth making. It's fan fiction. It's childish fan fiction. Yeah,
Now,
and as Thaddeus says, that he followed a road. I mean, like, who can write a verse like that? Can you write a surah like that? He followed a road.
but that's repeated 3 times though. He follows a road. He follows a road. He follows a road. And these are verses.
Wow.
So the crux of the matter is when we get to 1896, Yusuf Ali, bring me blocks of iron at length. Then we should. Then he filled up the space between the two mountain sides. He said, "Blow with your bellows." Then he said, he made it red as fire. He said, "Bring me that I may pour over it molten lead." This would be, now bear in mind, this would be the greatest architectural event in the history of building architecture.
Yeah. This one says
This was the
copper, not
greatest.
even lead.
This is it covers it in copper, so it's
Oh.
made in iron, then covered in some say
Oh, my bad. Yeah.
brass,
Sorry.
yeah, or copper. So this would be the greatest architectural building since men building buildings. This would be the greatest industrial event in human's history. Where is the evidence of the furnaces required to make the iron blocks? Where is the evidence of the technique to have the iron covered the wall in brass? How long did it take to build the greatest architectural structure in human history? How many men did it take to build the wall? Why is
You
there
could
no
neither scale it nor tunnel through it. And as we know, this one says Salam's quest for Alexander's wall. And where did he end up? He ended up in China, and he ended up where? You there, Thunderous?
So yeah, sorry. So you, because you went out for a moment, it blacked off. So what did you say?
I know. We also know from the early histories that there was an actual Islamic quest to find the wall.
They ended up in
And of
China.
course, this Salam and his quest for Alexander's wall. Now, this is obviously not clear in the history, but by some accounts, he ended up in China. And what is the big wall we have in China?
Well, it's a big stone wall, isn't it? It's
True,
not
but
between
the Great Wall, and he ended up at the Jade Gate in China, on the southeastern side of China. So he goes and finds the Great Wall, and apparently that's Alexander's wall.
But they've had to find something. But the thing is, it's easily disproven because it's not made of iron, it's not covered in lead, and it's not between two mountains, and anyone can scale it.
That's crazy. Yeah, exactly. You could climb the Great Wall. I think it would be possible. Ah, yes. Sorry. So for Adam says there are Negroes, Zanj, and
Yeah.
for whom we had not provided cover against the sun, and in the way of clothing or roofing, as the land could not support any structures. Okay, so they had quicksand, I guess, as their ground, and they had underground tunnels into which they would disappear at the rising of the sun, and out of which they would emerge when it was at its highest point, at its hottest. That makes no sense.
But the thing is, with Adam Seeker's quite correct. I didn't want to bring that up because the English translation for the word zanj is actually an unpleasant word that I didn't want to use on the airwaves.
Yeah,
So
I'm sorry. No, okay, yeah, you're right. Okay, let's YouTube strike that comment.
okay, so there's no record of this event. Why is there no folklore, tale, myth, isnad of this event? What I'm trying to say that is that every time that there's like an event in human history, this will be the greatest industrial event in human history, yet there's no evidence of it. There's not even any folklore of this actually taking place within an area or within a community of people, yet you would expect that there would be some historical recounting passed from one generation to another of this wall event taking place, yet there's none. Now, to grasp the enormity of it, one only has to look at the Great Pyramid in Egypt. The structure is built using 2.3 million stone blocks, each stone weighing between 2.2 and 2.3 tons. This is not taken into account the 15-ton beam blocks. Using simple building principles, the bottom of the wall will have to be bigger to hold the weight of the wall, and it will have to go conical or pyramid shaped as it reaches the point of the summit for the weight to be distributed. Modern day skyscrapers reflect this principle. That is to say, you have a big foundation, and as the building goes up, it tapers off so that the weight is evenly distributed.
And
Yet Dhul Qarnayn, with Allah's blessing of intelligence, has the top of the mountain heavier and bigger than at the bottom, like an upside down pyramid. The mind boggles.
And that makes no sense, engineering sense. And if their land could not support any structures, how could they have tunnels under land that could not support structures? Would you build tunnel on unstable land? I mean, would you mine where land could collapse and collapse on those tunnels? And how can you build this massive wall on a land that could not support any houses even?
or build it upside down. But even if that is, let's just, give the benefit of the doubt. If you're building a structure between two mountains, what's stopping people walking around the mountain? It's very much like when in Islam it says they teach that Noah's flood was regional, it wasn't global. Well, what's the point building the ark? Why not just go to a location that was elevated where the flood waters wouldn't even affect you? It doesn't make any sense. So these people where this wall is trying to keep Gog and Magog apart, why did they not just walk around the mountain? Scale the mountain, scale the wall. Go, you can probably burrow a hole through the mountain if you have to.
They could have tunneled under it because they made tunnels.
Then it says there in verse 1897,
okay,
thus they were made powerless to scale or dig through it. Well, who made them powerless? How were they made powerless? Why didn't Gog and Magog not just walk around the mountains? If they could not get through the brass and then the brass because they had no oxyacetylene, okay, why not just dig a tunnel through the mountains, burrow beneath the wall? Why did they not just hamper or halt or disrupt the building of the wall? This is an interesting point as well, because before this event takes place, we have to have Nehemiah was sent to Jerusalem to rebuild the wall. But I think it took about 7 years for Nehemiah to rebuild the wall because they were constantly being disrupted. That wall took several years to build. So how long did it take this wall? And why is it Gog and Magog didn't have the presence of mind to disrupt the wall being built? After all, this has happened before in history. Are they trapped in the same time period as when the wall was built? Thus, they have not modernized. If they are trapped in the same time period as when the wall was built, why or how can they not possibly succeed against the sciences we have today? Because one has to bear in mind that according to Yasser Qadi, they're going to come out from this wall and they're going to cause devastation on the planet. But if they've been living in a secluded time zone area where we can't find or hasn't been discovered yet, how do we know what advances they're making? How do they know what advances we've been making if there's no communication between the two peoples? That is Gog and Magog and the rest of the world, or the rest of the world and Gog and Magog.
Man, I don't know what to say because apparently I had a blonde moment. So apparently the wall was in a different location than the quicksand that these people lived under. I mean, if you can't build on top of it, can you build under it if it's too unstable to build on? But yeah, fair enough. But I mean, with satellites today, do Muslims claim that this story is literally the word of Allah and therefore 100% true?
Well, I've asked Muslims, and these are some of the responses I've got. It's sank in the ground. It's at the North Pole. Have you ever seen your brain? So why do you believe you have a brain if you haven't seen it? It was on Google 10 years ago, but they've removed it. Yeah, those are the excuses I've had so far.
It's like those 300 prophets that are buried next to the Kaaba, as well as the 90-foot tall skeleton of Adam buried next to the Kaaba. Islam would win a slam dunk. We would all believe them if they would just show us a radar image or dig up the skeleton of Adam next to the Kaaba and show us the 90-foot, 36-meter tall Adam. Or radar scans of 300 still preserved prophets in prayer position next to the Kaaba. How hard would it be to show us these 300 graves of these? Slam dunk, immediate win. Why don't they give us the evidence? It would be so easy. Why aren't they investing a lot of money to find this wall? Because then Islam would win slam dunk right away.
Well, Reza Dancers mentions the point that the main Muslim excuse is that the wall won't appear until the end times, but that is they've made that up. They've gone beyond scripture by making that statement, because that statement is not made in the Quran and it's not made in the Hadith. So it's like when they turn around and say things like, well, the Bible's being corrupted or the Bible's been interfered with, it's been doctored. The irony is the most bastardized religion on the planet is the Quran, because the Quran makes a statement and it's lies and the corruption that defend it.
Man,
no, the wall does not. The wall won't appear until the end times. Well, where does Allah
did we
say
find
that?
the wall of Jericho? I'm just curious. Has the wall of Jericho been found? I mean, is that archaeologically proven?
That's archaeological true. If you go by David Roll in the book Pharaohs and Kings, he says he's found the wall. He's also found some places of Solomon's temple, because the description of Solomon's temple with a cubic of stone, then some beech wood and a cubic of stone. They found structures with a cubic of stone, some beech wood and some a cubic of stone. So there is archaeological evidence. But the problem we've got with biblical architecture and history, there is Egyptology, and Egyptology is the, if you like, the calibration of time for many historians. And anything that throws out the Egyptology that's been set up in the 1850s gets thrown under the bus, or is twisted and contorted to make it fit the narrative of Egyptology.
Yeah, that's true. I actually read, I actually subscribe to Biblical Archaeology Review, and there's a lot of, and I subscribe to them, and there's some really good work there. However, what you find is it's very contentious. There are lots of varying opinions, also varying quality of opinions, but also they are, shall we say, there are non-Christian atheists or archaeologists that are vested in disproving anything biblical, whereas you've got others who seem, so you've got this fight even within the archaeologist community, and so it just muddies the waters.
Well, you find that anything that supports the Bible and anything that supports intelligent design, there's a war in those two domains, and it's a big war, because both of them prove the Bible true. Science wants to prove evolution, and the more it digs into evolution, the more you find in evolution is just totally absurd and impossible, though the Bible makes that statement in Romans 1:20. With archaeology, it's exactly the same thing. You're finding now that some of the things that were set up in the 1850s as far as Egyptology is concerned can't be calibrated with what we understand of history today. And you're finding, as we move forward with history, the Bible is the great, if you like, parallel to secular history. You have biblical history and secular history, and both of them are calibrated at exactly the same time. The names are the same, the locations are the same, the geographical locations are the same, the weights, the measures, the currencies. One doesn't dispute with the other, one doesn't conflict with the other. They harmonize together. It's the only book in history that does that.
Yeah, I think so we need to change the term perfectly preserved to magically preserved. I think that would be more accurate. The Quran is magically preserved.
Which version? There's 31.
No, it's just that Yeshua is Yahweh, says, are they perfectly preserved? So it's just that's a propagandistic term. It's a loaded term that they've created, whereas it's magically preserved. We know it's not perfectly preserved. It's just the bodies. I know. Recent answers: the bodies of the prophets. Oh, sorry, the 300 perfectly preserved prophets. Yeah, they're supposed to be, according to Islam, apparently prophets, their bodies will not decompose after death, right? So therefore they are all apparently in prayer positions next to the Kaaba, and their bodies have not decomposed. All they got to do is dig one up, and they'll have a very strong case for Islam. But for some reason they seem very insistent on concreting the whole place over, which they've done. And so sorry, Thunderous, go on please.
No, I was just reading some of the comments on the side, and Yeshua was saying now they are building all around the Kaaba and Mecca. They should find them all right. Well, they won't. They're not building around there. They're concreting over everything. You won't find them now, because not only are they buried in a coffin casket with a load of mud on them, they're now getting several feet of concrete too.
Yeah, it's really crazy that.
It's an absurd story, isn't it? That every time you look at the Quranic and you try and break it down, when it gives a narrative of something or other that is supposed to be historical, there's just nothing that can calibrate it with history. And the more you look into it, it's alarming that you're finding myth and history somehow finding its way as a real narrative. The Jews and the Christians must have been laughing at Muhammad when he was coming out with these responses, almost setting him up. I get the impression sometimes when the Jews and the Christians were approaching Muhammad, setting him up, they were setting him up to mock him. That's why his vengeance and his hatred was such with them. I mean, that's why you have certain ayah in the Quran where it turns around and says that Muhammad was all ears, like is it 61, 961, where it says, and among them there arose the abuse of the Prophet and say he is an ear. Well, you get that now with this narrative. He heard a story, so they already know who he is and what kind of person he is. He's listening to a story and he believes it's real. They then ask him a question and he gives them the answer, and somehow it becomes the Quran.
Right. Just like the in 532, 533, a line from the rabbis written in the Talmud suddenly becomes the words of Allah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And here's the list of, for those who are curious, I just did a search here. These are Sunan Ibn Majah and An-Nasai, showing that Allah has forbidden the earth to consume the bodies of the prophets. So this is, of course, I did show you the 200-foot long grave of Adam in Yemen, or in Oman, but notice that hadiths are disappearing from these collections, right? These people are cleaning up various verses. They're rewriting the English versions. When you look at the translations, they're very different, and some hadiths are starting to disappear. It's been happening for many years now. Yeah.
Well,
So,
you can see why that is now. That you'll find if the system was to go on for say another 100 years, 150 years, you'll probably find that there won't be any hadith anymore. It will just be Quran only.
yeah.
But then the thing is, you see, if you're going to start destroying the hadith because of the stories that are found in the hadith, there are more absurd stories in the Quran. Where do you draw the line there then?
I mean, this is. I mean, clearly, this is. I can't find alive in their graves, which is very interesting. The prophets are alive in their graves, so.
Or as Samuel Flores says, the religion of abrogation and confusion.
Yeah, true. Agreed. If this is true history, if this is the word of Allah, then why can we not verify any of this archaeologically?
And the interesting is, if you read the Quran in the way that it's put together, then it is confusion. But if you put it in together, if you read it recalibrated so it's in revelation order, then it becomes devastating. And that's one of the things as well that I find quite interesting is why have they not released the Quran in order of revelation? Why do you think that is?
I think you'd see the manipulation, you'd see the confusion, the haphazard nature of it. It's designed to confuse already. It's deliberately jumbled up to confuse. Thank you, Catholic publicist. Go on, please, Thunderous.
And I was just saying that if they did release the Quran in revelation order, then it becomes obvious what the Quran is all about. The further you get towards the end of Muhammad's ministry.
And how would you define? What would you define that to be?
Belligerence and hatred.
Yeah. I was going to use the word hatred. That's one word I would have used. Yeah, I mean it's very clear. Now we didn't go into a huge sort of documentary discussion in terms of the old documents, the Syriac documents, the Ethiopian documents, the Aramaic documents, the Greek documents, the Egyptian documents on Dhul Qarnayn and the early Islamic views on him. We didn't do that, but just from this, it's clear to see there's a huge issue with this myth, and it's known to be myth that came from much earlier. These myths all developed shortly after the death of Alexander the Great.
Yeah, but can you imagine the logistics of trying to collect that amount of iron to build a wall the size of a mountain?
Impossible.
It's simple, exactly. Then the logistics of having to have a foundry set up to melt the oil, the iron down to make blocks. Then you'd have to have the logistics of lifting with some kind of
scaffold. How did they connect the blocks? Did they smelt them together? Did they have welding? No, they would have had to connect them using metal connectors. And if you go to say South America, where some of these huge I'm trying to think of the name of one of the sites, but you've got these huge stone blocks, but they're linked together with metal clips, like little paper clips kind of things that connect these blocks together. And these clips still exist today. They're found all over the place. So how did they connect these blocks together?
Even if the Muslim could turn around and say, well, that's what the brass or the copper was used to, if you like, reinforce the block so the wall wouldn't come tumbling down. Okay, let's even give them that. but the logistics of the scaffolding in itself would be the greatest scaffolding event in human history.
That's also true.
And
Oh.
also the lifting, the hoisting of the blocks to get to the top of the mountain will be the greatest event in itself
Fair
in
enough.
human history.
And Reasonable Answers Apologetics tells us that Allah sent the iron down from heaven. Duh. Problem solved. I guess so.
And Arnold and Nathaniel says they're using logic, common sense, and evidence and truth. Please stop it. What else have we got to go with? If we weren't going to use any of that, the show wouldn't exist.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, as Christians, we want to see the archaeological evidence. We want to fight for the truth. We want to look. We dig.
Well,
with the Muslims, whereas Yasser Qadi was, don't ask questions, just, or you'll lead into trouble. This will lead us to trouble.
And this flies in the face of what the God of the Bible says, because if you go to Proverbs chapter 2 verses 1 to 5, he actually says, dig for it as for hidden treasure. So learning is something important to him. If you go to what Jesus said, he says, keep on seeking, keep on knocking, keep on asking. So keep on seeking, keep on knocking. That's a very proactive thing to do as far as education and knowledge is concerned. And yet Islam is totally the opposite. It is a case of blind faith. Listen and follow.
Yeah, sent down as a reference to the scientific miracle of iron. Here's a question. If the Quran was magically preserved, how come the black rock, the black stone, wasn't preserved? Isn't that so important?
Well, where it's been fondled by women that have sinned. That's why it's turned black.
Yeah, but why was it broken? Isn't this, if this is Allah's holiest thing on earth, wouldn't he preserve it?
Was it the Karmatains or the Karmians or something like that?
The Karmatians, they stole it and took it to Bahrain. I mean, like, you'd think, like, okay, that's odd. And then they smashed it like an idol?
They smashed it, yeah. They smashed it and then sent it back. Did they send all of it back, or was it some of it back?
They had to reassemble some of it, so some pieces were missing. They had to re-glue it, and they stuck it into that. I mean, just black pebbles. Yeah, exactly. None of this makes any.
How many times has the Kaaba been attacked as well?
It's been rebuilt multiple times. Even the door that I read so far, that door in recent history has been replaced like 6 times.
And how many people have died when they've gone on pilgrimage?
Too many. Too many. Yeah.
Mecca is a death trap. Let's have it right.
And Mecca's been covered by locusts, and when it floods, the sewage overflows, and you have floating poo. Yeah, man, this is yeah. I mean, there's more questions. Where's the archaeological evidence? Where is the very clear answer? Why are we told by this PhD, Yasser Qadi PhD, that don't ask questions, or this will lead us into trouble?
This is something in itself as well. When you've got an intelligent man like Yasser Qadi, who clearly is an intelligent man, how does he live with himself following a faith system that he knows does not answer the questions and lies to its adherents? And he himself is a gatekeeper to the lies. He's part of the gatekeeping. For instance, the Quran, the narrative has holes in it. Don't ask me to write down what on a mushaf what's in heaven. That's a damning indictment. And your role, as far as trying to get to help people understand who God is, and the only way you can do that is by deception. How is that any different to the Pharisees of the first century? And look at the way that Jesus condemned the Pharisees in the first century with John 8:44. You are from your father, the devil. He did not stand fast in the truth. When he speaks a lie, he speaks to his own disposition. And yet the Yasser Qadis of today are doing exactly the same thing. How much of a reprehensible man is Yasser Qadi then?
I think he's in a tough position. He's in a very tough position. He cannot afford to tell the truth. It's already cost him too much. So. But
to lie upon lie upon lie. But then the thing is, to see, if your whole premise is a lie, which is what Islam is, all you can ever do is lie to defend it. Truth does not defend lies any more than lies are required to defend truth. Truth defends truth and lies defend lies. It's really that simple.
Adam says, I clicked on the next hadith. No, I had the right one. I pasted the one that you gave me, but it's not saying the right thing, Adam. It's different to, let me see what Adam said. Let me just grab this, drop it here, and then you guys can see what Adam sent me.
KC says Yassakide is not intelligent. He's a devious Scalia. Yes, but I still hold out. I think he's an intelligent man.
He's clearly educated. I mean,
Yeah.
he studied at what, Cambridge or Oxford, Cambridge, and he has a PhD. Oh, this is the right one. It's just, it's just, yeah. I mean, he's forced to lie. He has no choice. So.
Anyway, so that was my kind of like analyzing of the Quran and this section of the Quran with Dhul Qarnayn. I think as I've said, the Dhul Qarnayn, who he is, it could be touched on. I thought there's too many people. It's been done a couple of times already, but no one has sort of like looked at. Well, let's look at each verse and see what's that saying. What information can we glean from that can help us in our understanding. And the more questions that you ask, like where is it? How did it get built? The deviousness of the words being used, yet it's supposed to be a pure language that reached its pinnacle in Muhammad's day. Yet the reality is, when you look at the Islamic narrative, Arabic was the pure Arabic that was in heaven. So Adam would have had it on earth as the first man speaking to his wife and children. Doesn't make any sense.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Then thank you. I just want to finish up with a handful of notes that I found. I'm not going to go through all of this. Just a handful of notes. There's a Syriac work called the Neshana Dile de Alexandros, which means the glorious deeds of Alexander. This was extant in the same 5 manuscripts as the Syriac Alexander Romance. There were numerous versions, but there's not just the Alexander Romance. Okay, there's also what's called the Alexander Legend. Right, there was another one called the Alexander Legend, which is distinguished from the Alexander Romance. This is in the Quran in its historical context, edited by Gabriel Said Reynolds. Right, they speak of that. Then there's Al-Qadr, the Green Man, which is also taken from the Alexander Romance, but it seems that the Alexander Romance also takes from the Epic of Gilgamesh, and itself also traces to the Jewish story of Rabbi Joshua ben Levi and Elijah. So it is known that Muslims borrow characters from, so there's another character borrowed from the Alexander Romance, borrowed from the Epic of Gilgamesh, and also which is traced to the Jewish myths. Right, so this is another story that Muslims have borrowed. There are fables written in Greece and Egypt dating to 200 AD, so this is a very early story. Even the infancy Gospel of Thomas apparently has parallels with the Alexander Romance. Right, and the first book on the history of Alexander is in Alexandria, and Alexandria was one of the hotbeds of heresy. Right, Alexandria was one of the places where major heresy happened, and also Gnosticism. A lot of Gnosticism arose there. And then there's a Sassanid version of the life of Alexander, right, which still survives, not in the original language, but in the Syriac translations. And it says here, as has been demonstrated, was clearly one of the sources of the Muslim account of the deeds of Dhul Qarnayn. Encyclopaedia of Islam, volume 10. And then the Khuya does not leave any doubt. We have found the origin of the legend about the wall of Gog and Magog, as it appears in Pseudo-Callisthenes and the Quran, in the great Chinese wall with the jade gate. And we've restored Salam's travel account as a report of a real journey. So apparently they went, according to this scholar at least, they went and looked for this wall, and they ended up in China at the Great Wall. Al-Masudi, as I mentioned earlier, steals the story from it, and he tells this story. This is a very well-known Islamic historian. He tells a story also stolen from the Alexander Romance about monsters, right? And he tells it as truth when it's known to be a legend. Okay, it is known completely, and this is mentioned in Ibn Khaldun's Al-Muqaddimah. So they have stolen numerous of these stories. So yeah, I will leave it at that. Let's finish up any last questions, and then we call it a day.
No, I'm fine. Thank you for that. It's the first time I've done it like this, so it might have sounded a little bit discombobulated. I've got to work on it a little bit, but no, thank you for this opportunity, Lloyd.
No, you're welcome. No, thank you. I mean, this is interesting. You always present. I wish you would have some slides so you can just at least a few bullet points. But fine. I mean, I was able to bring up a lot of what you referenced, and thanks for the very helpful comments and pointers in the chat. And thank you all for the donations, much appreciated. But also, you always bring up these really interesting perspectives on the standard narrative, Thunderous. You give us a lot of food for thought.
I hope so. But you're quite right, and you've said it to me before, Lloyd. I need to. If I had a PowerPoint presentation, I think the way I speak and that would probably be flowing a lot better. So a lesson has been learnt, and a point has been taken.
No, I mean, I think Guzwa 23. I think we can all agree that the Quran is a hodgepodge. It's a collection. It was written over a long period by a number of different authors. And yeah, the tafsir often contain details of the source text not found in the Quran, and that is true. And do I have a Patreon account? No, I do not. Yeah,
I
so
think as
guys,
well.
yeah.
I think as well with the Quran, when you for those who have actually sat at home and tried to read through it, it doesn't make well for reading. So if you're trying to read in an undertone, if you're trying to read out aloud, in whatever translation that you have, it doesn't make for a clear reading. There's no sense from modulation. The words are very jumbled, and one verse to the next verse can be very jumbled, even if it's in the same a narrative is being given. And then it just suddenly jumps narratives as well. You go from one situation to another. So when you're trying to have a discussion on the Quran, unless you pick out one single verse and stick with that and analyze that, or a statement or a theme, when you're going from one verse to the other, it can sound very discombobulated. It's not necessarily the person that's presenting it's discombobulated, it's the Quran itself. Does it lend itself to good reading?
You're right. You're right. No, agreed. So thanks, guys. I hope that was interesting. I certainly found it entertaining and interesting as well. I mean, yeah, there are questions which don't have answers, questions which must be asked, and Muslims are going, well, don't ask those questions. So, and I think they need to start presenting proof.
They most certainly do. A war would help.
A wall, some bodies at the Quran, anything. Yeah, guys. Oh, yeah, thank you. So, guys, by the way, I've been in touch with someone called Nuria Khan. I should be doing a talk with her on this Saturday. I'll post the details as soon as I have them. To my knowledge, she is an atheist. She's an ex-Muslim. She had a terrible experience, which eventually led her to leave Islam. And yeah, but she seems very open to speaking with non with non-atheists. She seems very open to people who are Christians, and far more accepting than some others who are very very antagonistic. So she's been watching. Apparently she subscribes to Adam and she watches Adam's shows. She likes them and she likes Thunderous. So he's been in touch with her too, and they should be doing some talks. And yeah, I'll be presenting on her show on Saturday. So polemics on Sunday, yes. So Adam on Friday. So I'm talking with Adam on Friday. We're discussing the monotheism on Friday. Then on Saturday I have Nuria Khan. I'll be talking about monotheism as well. And then on Sunday, polemics with reasonable answers apologetics. Okay, guys, thank you very much. Thunderous, thank you very much again. I hope to see you next week. We'll do the same.
Take care. Bye bye.
Thanks, guys. Good night. God bless. Take care.